In this video, I'll go over a simple process of taking some data, calculating a 5-number summary on Excel, adding in the mean and the mode, then drawing a vertical box plot right on Excel, very simply using some of the draw features, and then all the information is right there all at once for you. If you find that the video is going a little bit too slow, just crank up the speed a little bit. If you're finding it's going a little bit too fast, slow it down or go back and take a look. The best way, as always, when looking at one of these videos is to watch the video perhaps on your mobile device and then use your laptop or your desktop to go over the actual video in Excel. I'll be very slow in explaining some of the functions just to make sure that everyone understands those clearly. So to start with, let's just go over what's required by this particular problem. First of all, we're given a data set. In this particular case, it's given to us as though we would find it in Excel. And then we just have to complete the following tasks that are down below. Let me scroll up a little bit here. And we see that we have to calculate the 5-number summary. We'll go over that in just a minute. We'll calculate the mean and the mode as well. In this case, it's asking for a horizontal box plot. We're going to skip over this right now, and then we'll look at the vertical box plot, but with the lower numbers at the top and the higher numbers at the bottom. And I'll explain why this is the case when we get to Excel. It makes it a little bit easier in Excel to do this. And then also we'll label the box plot with each number from the 5-number summary. And then in addition to that, we'll indicate the mean and the mode. Finally, we'll describe in words what the box plot says about the data set. And then you're supposed to include your opinion on whether the data set is symmetric or skewed negatively or skewed positively. And we'll even show some information in Excel that'll help you with that. Okay, let's move over to Excel now to get this started. So here's the data set in Excel, starting with 8, ending down here at 11. If you look down here, there's 21. I put it right at the top, so we know there's 21 different observations in our data set. We don't know what this data is necessarily. We don't have to know in order to do the box plot. So let's do that first, and then we'll talk about the data afterwards. The best way to do this, we know that for the box plot, there's different numbers we need. We need to have the minimum and the maximum. We need to have the quartile 1 and quartile 3, and then we have to have the median. But we also know that the minimum is kind of like saying quartile 1 when you're in Excel. I'll show you the formula in just a minute. And the maximum is like quartile 4, the end of quartile 4, and the median is right there in the middle. It's quartile 2. So I could actually go through here, and instead of saying minimum, Q1, median, Q3, and max, I could actually go through instead and just call this Q0, Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4. I might go ahead and do it this way just because it's easier for me when I start to write the functions over here, so that I can copy and paste those functions and save myself some time instead of using the min function, the max function, the median function, and then the quartile functions for 1 and 3. So let's go ahead and just use the quartile function here. We'll start, and you can watch here as I type it, or you can watch in the function box here at the top afterwards. So I'll just use the equal sign and then quartile. That's my quartile function. I open it with an open parentheses. It says right in there array and then the quartile. And so using my arrow key, I can just move up here to the top to the 8. I can use my shift key, and that anchors it. So then when I use my down arrow key with the shift key pressed, then it highlights. You can do the same thing with your mouse if you're a mouse person. Then you put a comma. I have my comma and my space. And now I have to put in the quartile. In this particular case, I'm looking for the minimum, which is quartile 0. I put my 0. I put my end parentheses to finish it off. And you'll notice there when I put my 0 that it does say down here, you can see where it says minimum value, quartile 1, first quartile, median is the quartile 2, the third quartile is 3, and the max is 4. So in this case, it says it right there for you. You don't have to worry about it. I put my 0, I end my parentheses, I push enter, and because I know up here that the minimum in there, let's take a look, is a 3. I should get a 3 in this particular box. I push enter, and there it is. I get my 3. Now I'm going to put a little line here underneath just so that we have some way to take a look at our numbers and not be confused with what's underneath there. Now, I'm going to do this analysis just having the data like it is right here. I'll also do the analysis afterwards with the data sorted by smallest to largest, just to show you that it doesn't really matter which order the data is in. Excel's going to take care of this for you. Now, before we move over to doing the same thing here, we could do this. We could say equal quartile, and I could open up the parentheses, and I could get my array, and I could put in my quartile number. I could do all that, but instead, let's take advantage of the fact that we're in a spreadsheet and we can copy and paste. The problem is, if I copy this formula up here at the top, and it goes from B1 to B21, so B1 to B21, if I do it again down here and copy it, then it'll go to B2 to B22, and that's not what we want. So let me show you here. If I take this formula, copy it down, well, it's going to have the 3 still because that's the lowest number there, but if you look inside up here, it says B2 to B22. That's not what we want. So let me delete that. What I'm going to do instead is I'll go into quartile 0. I'll go up here to the top, and then what I'll do is I'll put a $sign in front of the 1, and then move over with a $sign in front of the 21. That holds on to that and anchors those particular rows, even though I can copy the B's. If I move across, it'll go to C, D, E, and I can move it sideways across the columns, but when I move it downwards, it keeps the 1 and the 21 there. So once I've done that, I can just push enter. The formula is still the same. Now I can copy that formula all the way down to Q4, and of course, as I move down, you'll see that it goes B1 to B21. I move down, all the way down, and it still is B1 to B21. The problem is it says quartile 0, and I want it to be quartile 1, 2, 3, and 4. So as I click on this particular box here, I'll go to the top, double click on that 0, I'll put a 1, and then enter, and now it moves down to the next one. I'll double click on that one. I want 2 this time, so I'll put a 2, and enter. It moves down to the next. I double click on the 0, I put a 3, and then enter, and then finally the last one, I double click on the 0, and I need a 4 this time. I put 4, which it shows here as the maximum, and then I say enter. Now I have my minimum, and I'll put this in parentheses here so you can see it, the min. I have Q1, Q2, and in parentheses there, I'll put median, and then down at the bottom, the Q4, which is the same as the max. Now I have my 5 numbers for my 5-number summary. Easy as pie. Now we'll go ahead and we'll put in the mean, and then for the mean, the formula for mean is average, so we'll say equals average, open up the parentheses, and I'll go to the top, I'll drop down to the bottom to the 11, and end it, and there's my mean, and I'll also put the mode, move over again, and that is just mode, move to the top, move down to the bottom of our data set, and then put that in. And then finally, what we'll take a look at is we'll put the skewness. So we can fit that in there. And that's just going to be equal skew. And I'll go to the top, drop down to the bottom, and finish that one off. And there we have the skewness. So we have all that data. Now, I mentioned that what we would like to do is take this data over here, move it over. So I'll copy it, I'll paste it. And then what I'd like to do is take just that data set right there and sort that. So I'll take the data, I'll sort it from smallest to largest. And so there we can see clearly that the 3 is the smallest number in the minimum, that the 30 is the largest number, the maximum. It says the mode is 9. We see here that there's 3 9s, there's 2 7s, everything else there's only 1 of each, so that truly is the mode. And it's much easier to see the data when it's all done in order. But either way, it doesn't matter. I'll copy over these formulas to the right. As I copy them to the right, you can see clearly that the same thing happens. And again, this is now using C1 through 21, C1 through 21. And you can see it doesn't matter what order the data set is in. Either way, you're still going to get the same results. So that's it. That's all you need to do to figure out what the 5-number summary plus the mean plus the mode, and in this case we have the skewness. Now we'll go ahead and use the drawing tools in Excel to draw a vertical box plot right here, having the minimum near the top, the maximum near the bottom. The reason we're going to do it that way is we're going to actually use these numbers on the side as kind of a number line. So from 1 to 30, or actually in this case from 3 right here to 30, we'll use those numbers here on the side, on the left side, as our number line to draw our box plot over here on the right. So fairly easily, I go over to, if you go to the top, we'll go to Insert, and then we go to Insert, and then Shapes. Let me move this up so you can see that as well. There we go. We go to Insert, over to Shapes. We'll just start with a rectangle, and we'll draw a rectangle in here, and we'll formulate how big we'll make it in just a few minutes. So we'll take this rectangle, we'll start off by, in fact, what we'll do is we'll go in and we'll format it. We'll get rid of the fill, and I'll make no fill, and then we'll go to the line, and with the line I'll increase the width of the line just so I can make it a little bit stronger so I can see it more easily, and then I'll make sure that the colors are all going to match later on. No big deal. So I'll take this, and what I want to do is I know that my boxes actually go from Q1 to Q2 and then from Q2 to Q3. So that would be from 8 to 11 and from 11 to 19. So I'll start this box and I'll go over here to 8, and I'll take on that line, I'll take my box and drop it down so that the midpoint of the box is actually right there in the midpoint of that line for 8. So I know that that's where Q1 is. And then Q2 is at 11. So I'll take the other end of the box and move it up so it's right there more or less in the midpoint of that section. In this particular case, I'm just going to do Control C, I'll do Control V, make another box, and I know that the second box is actually going to start right there at the median, so I'll just try to line that up more or less there. It starts there at 11 and then it moves down to 19, so I'll drag the bottom part of this box down to 19. And there's the first part of my box plot. That's the box plot without the whiskers. Now to draw the whiskers, I'll just go back up to Insert, I'll go to Shapes, and I'll insert a line this time. And then I'll just draw my line. I'll start it here. Now the bottom whisker, right, to the larger number, goes down to 30. So I'll start my line here. I'll move it all the way down to the midpoint of the line for 30. There it is, the line for 30. I'll go over and actually change the line so I can make it a little bit thicker. I'm putting my lines at 3, and then I'll match the color to the other one so that they all match. I will copy that line, and I'll move it up to the top. Again, this will go from 3 to 8. And so I'll take that top part of the line and put it right there in the center part of the 3 row. And now I have my box plot. So not the prettiest box plot ever, but it's good enough. Now let's go ahead and put in some labels. If you actually go back to Insert, you can insert a text box and draw a little text box, and you can just type in the text that you're going to put there. So in our particular case, we can say that that the minimum, let's say min, the minimum is at 3. So I've got my little text box right there that says the minimum is 3. And I'll move this up here so I understand that the minimum right there is at 3. And I'll just copy that and paste it again. Move it down here to the bottom where the maximum will be. The max is 30. Again, I'll copy and I'll paste using Control C and Control V. Right here, this particular line at 8, that is over here, 8 is at Q1. So Q1 is 8. I'll copy and paste this box for Q4, or sorry, Q3. I'll go down for Q3. Q3, let's take a look over here, is 19. And then finally the last one we have here will be the median. And that's right here at 11. We need to open that box up just a little bit more, give them some space. Okay, so there's my 5-number summary: minimum, Q1, median, Q3, and maximum. We might want to go ahead and put in the other labels on the other side. So let's toss in some labels. Let's put the mean, and the mean, it says the mean is, let's see, 13.67. So I'll go here to 13, but it's somewhere between the middle of 13 and 14, maybe a little closer to the 14. That's my mean. So that's 13.67. And let's put the mode in as well. And in this particular case, it says down here the mode is 9. So I'll go up here to 9. Right there in the center of the 9 row. And I'll put the mode of 9. All right, so simple enough. We took a look at our data set right here. We sorted the data set so we could also show that it's in order. We did our minimum using the quartile function, and then put in our dollar signs to anchor those, and we copied the function down, and then all we did is went in and changed that each time from a 0 as we move down to a 1, then to a 2, then to a 3, then to a 4. And it made it much easier than having to go out there and say use the minimum function. If you'd like to use the minimum function, that's perfectly okay. You can do it. If I wanted to, I'll just do it over here to the side. I could do min, and then I move up and I capture those numbers. I could come here for median, and I could say use the median function. And the same thing, it still works. And I can move down to the max function and use the maximum function. And again, I should get 30 on this one. And there we go. So whether I use the minimum, the median, and the max, or I just use the Q's, Q0, Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, I find using the quartiles is much faster. We could also use the percentiles and do the percentile of 0, percentile of 25, of 50, of 75, and of 100. Now, in this particular case for Excel, instead of saying it's going to be the 25th and putting the number 25, you would use 0, 0.25, 0.50, 0.75, and 1.00. The mean, simple enough. The mode, and then the skewness, we can talk about that in a minute. So to think about how we can interpret this, always think about how all the data that's in here, that the number of data points that's in this particular box is the same as the number of data points here, and the same as the number of data points up here in this whisker, and the same as the number of data points here. So by knowing that, you know that Q2, that the second quartile, right, that's the same as the median, Q2, that in Q2, the data is very compressed. There's a lot of things that are close together. And if you think about that, between 8 and 11, let's highlight that. From 8 to 11, you can see it's 8, 9, 10, 11, all very tight. But when you look at 11 to 19 now, if I go 11 to 19, it's the same grouping of data, right, the same size, but it's all spread out a lot more. And that gives us a little bit of information. If we were to take this and make a histogram or a dot plot, it would tell us more. The same down at the bottom here, we can see that 19 to 30, that's a pretty big spread. A spread of 30 minus 19 is 11. That's a huge spread compared to the 11 minus 8 is only 3. So we have the same number of data points, but in a much wider spread, right? It's much more spread out. So as we look at this, then, we would say that our feeling is, because the median's at 11, the mean is 13.67, the mean is being pulled higher, right, or being pulled to a larger number. I know I've made the graph upside down and it's going to confuse some of you, but like I said, it was so we could use these particular numbers on the side as our points. You can do the same thing, and if you wanted to, you could just actually start at 30 up here at the top, and you could work your way down by doing 30, 29, 28, and then just use that as your number line instead. And that way, your maximum number would be at the top instead of the bottom. But in this particular case, and you can see that those numbers here in this particular box, that they're compressed. And so I would say here that the median's 11, the mean is being pulled to a higher number, and that would suggest that there may be a skewness that's positive. Take a look down here at the skewness. It's a 0.7, 0.7. It's not huge. It's not like a 2.3 or a 4.7, whatever. But at least it gives us an idea that there is a little bit of a positive skew. And that tells us there's a lot of data grouped here, and then we have a little less data grouped here, and then we have this kind of long tail. If we were to take this number down here, 30, and then change it, let me highlight the skewness right there. And if I take this 30 number, and let's say we change this 30 number to something much bigger. Let's change it to, let's say, 60. What should happen to the skewness as I push enter? The skewness increases quite a bit to 2.6. That's because now the mean's pulled up to a 15. So the mean hasn't changed a lot, but that maximum number goes all the way up to 60, and it's really been pulled to the top. Notice that none of the other numbers have changed. The Q0 is still 3, the Q1's 8, Q2's 11, and Q3 is 19. But we have this outlier up there that makes the max up at the top. The only difference here in this particular box and whiskers plot is this particular whisker would go all the way to 60 and go off our screen. Now, what would this tell us? It depends on what the data is. If for some reason this data, let's say that it's sales data or sales volume data, then we would have an understanding, and let's say it's for a B2B company, and we have 21, so in this case 21 of these of our clients. I'm going to move this back to a 30, by the way, so we have the original data. But if that were the case, then what we would say is our typical customers, right, where they're grouped more together, our typical customers might be between this 8 and 11. And that makes sense because we have a mode of 9. But in that case, I would say that this is what's happening usually, is people in the 8, 9, 10, 11 range. Now, what doesn't, even though there's this 11 to 19, we have the same number of customers, but they are more spread out. That person who has an 11 seems to be quite different than the 19. The 19 is almost double in the amount of sales. And let's say the sales per month, whatever it happens to be. And then from the 19 to the 30, again, that's a big range in the sense that the 30 is 1.5 times greater than the 19. If you go down to the smallest end, from a 3 to an 8, well, the 8 is almost 3 times greater than the 3. So you can see that there is a significant amount of diversity in the types of people in this tail, and in this box. But in this box right there in the middle, Q2, that goes from 8 to 11, that those people tend to be the same, at least in what their purchases are. Doesn't mean they're the same type of customer from some other type of segmentation perspective, but from the perspective of sales volume, they seem to be fairly the same. That's probably all we'll get out of this particular box and whiskers plot, but it gives us something at least. It gives us a way to visualize our data. Visualizing data like this is a lot harder than visualizing data like this, but when you get this box and whiskers plot, it is helpful. When you take this and compare it to another data set and how that box and whiskers plot is, that really starts to get you to understand this. What I really need you to do is start to find ways to visualize data, whether it's on Excel, you draw it out, or you use Tableau. The idea is to start to think of data from a visual perspective. That's going to help you understand your data, and it's going to help you understand your marketing.